good morning, wherever you are, whatever time of day it is that you get your 20 minutes to read. It's important for your brain to know that you're going to spend the next 20 minutes reading. It's an enjoyable little chunk of time, and our lives are so busy right now. When we left off, I stopped reading on page 53. And before that, the dwarves had walked right into a bad situation. Bilbo went ahead and tried to become a pickpocket, completely unsuccessful at it. And then the dwarves, who I was kind of anticipating to come and save him, didn't get saved at all. They walked right into a bad situation. And for all of their bluster and worldly ways, they had problems as well. So sometimes you need to remember when you feel like you're the one that's unprepared for something, that other people who should be prepared are also unprepared. So if you're one of those people who like to blame yourself for everything going wrong, just remember it can happen to all of us. So Gandalf ended up saving them. The trolls turned to stone and they found the key to the door, or Bilbo had luckily gotten the key before the trolls turned to stone. And now he was, so they unlocked the door. Finally, this great stone door. I would have loved to have imagined that, this great stone door with this key hole carved into it, because we normally think of doors being made out of metal or wood. Okay, so they're in. And they said, so they swung the door back with one big push and they all went inside. And this is the version of The Hobbit that I'm reading. And I'm now on page 53. There were bones on the floor and a nasty smell was in the air. But there was a good deal of food jumbled carelessly on shelves and on the ground, among an untidy litter of plunder. All sorts, from brass buttons to pots full of gold coins standing in a corner. There were lots of clothes, too, hanging on the walls, too small for trolls. I am afraid they belonged to victims. And among them were several swords of various makes, shapes, and sizes. Two caught their eyes particularly because of their beautiful scabbards and jeweled hilts. Gandalf and Thorin each took one of these, and Bilbo took a knife in a leather sheath. It would have made only a tiny pocket knife for a troll, but it was good as a short sword for the hobbit. These look like good blades, said the wizard, half drawing them and looking at them curiously. They were not made by any troll, nor any smith among men in these parts and days. But when we can read the runes on them, we shall know more about them. Let's get out of this horrible smell, said Fili. So they carried out the pots of coins and such food as was untouched and looked fit to eat. Also 1 barrel of ale, which was still full. By that time they felt like breakfast, and being very hungry, they did not turn their noses up at what they had got from the troll's larder. Their own provisions were very scanty. Remember, they were running out of stuff. It had fallen off when the horse spooked. Now they had bread and cheese and plenty of ale and bacon to toast in the embers of the fire. After they slept, for their night had been disturbed, they did nothing more till the afternoon. Then they brought up their ponies and carried away the pots of gold and buried them very secretly not far from the track by the river, putting a great many spells over them, just in case they ever had the chance to come back and recover them. Wonder why they didn't take the gold with them. When that was done, they all mounted. They're like a little squirrel burying stuff. When that was done, they all mounted once more and jogged along again on the path towards the east. Where did you go to, if I may ask? Said Thorin to Gandalf as they rode along. To look ahead, said he, And what brought you back in the nick of time? Looking behind, said he. Exactly, said Thorin. But could you be more plain? Like none of this made sense to him. I went on to spy out our road. It will soon become dangerous and difficult. Also, I was anxious about replenishing our small stock of provisions. I had not gone very far, however, when I met a couple of friends of mine from Rivendell. Where's that? Asked Bilbo. Don't interrupt, said Gandalf. That's very important nowadays. We have a question, and oftentimes our question will be answered if we just keep paying attention. Don't interrupt, said Gandalf. You will get there in a few days now, if we're lucky, and find out all about it. As I was saying, I met two of Elrond's people. They were hurrying along for fear of the trolls. It was they who told me that 3 of them had come down from the mountains and settled in the woods not far from the road. They had frightened everyone away from the district, and they waylaid strangers. I immediately had a feeling that I wanted back. Looking behind, I saw a fire in the distance and made for it. So now you know. Please be more careful next time, or we shall never get anywhere. Thank you, said Thorin. I want to make mention, I'm 6 minutes into our 20-minute read, that if you hear me say a word that you don't quite understand or don't understand the usage of it, please leave a message in the comments and we'll discuss it. Word, phrase, anything, any questions about the story. Okay, so we have made it to chapter 3 on page 55, and it's called A Short Rest. And I forgot to mention that you should take the chapter titles as kind of a main idea for that chapter. So chapter 3, A Short Rest. They did not sing or tell stories that day, even though the weather improved, nor the next day, nor the day after. They had begun to feel that danger was not far away on either side. They camped under the stars, and their horses had more to eat than they had, for there was plenty of grass. But there was not much in their bags, even with what they had got from the trolls. One morning they forded a river at a wide, shallow place, full of the noise of stones and foam. The far bank was steep and slippery. When they got to the top of it, leading their ponies, they saw that the great mountains had marched down very near to them. Already they seemed only a day's easy journey from the feet of the nearest. Dark and drear it looked, though there were patches of sunlight on its brown sides, and behind its shoulders the tips of snow peaks gleamed. Is that the mountain? The is in italics. The mountain? Asked Bilbo in a solemn voice, looking at it with round eyes. He had never seen a thing that looked so big before, and he's anticipating that he's going to have to go in through the side door. Of course not, said Balin. That is only the beginning of the misty mountains, and we have to get through or over or under those somehow before we can come into Wilderland beyond. And it is a deal of a way even from the other side of them to the lonely mountain in the east, where Smaug lies on our treasure. So their mountain, their ancestral mountain, has kind of a new name. It's called the Lonely Mountain, so it must be off set by itself. Oh, said Bilbo, and just at that moment he felt more tired than he ever remembered feeling before. He was thinking once again of his comfortable chair before the fire in his favorite sitting room in his Hobbit hole, and of the kettle singing, not for the last time. Now Gandalf led the way. We must not miss the road, or we shall be done for, he said. We need food for one thing, and rest in reasonable safety. Also, it is very necessary to tackle the misty mountains by the proper path. or else you will get lost in them and have to come back and start at the beginning again, if you ever get back at all." They asked him where he was making for, and he answered, "You are come to the very edge of the wild," capital W, so it's a name of a place. "The wild, as some of you may know. Hidden somewhere ahead of us is the fair valley of Rivendell, where Ellenrod lives in the last homely house." And that's capitalized as a name as well, last homely house. "I sent a message by my friends, and we are expected." That sounded nice and comforting, but they had not got there yet, and it was not so easy as it sounds to find the last homely house west of the mountains. There seemed to be no trees and no valleys and no hills to break up the ground in front of them, only one vast slope going slowly up and up to meet the feet of the nearest mountain, a wide land the color of heather and crumbling rock, with patches and slashes of grass green and moss green showing where water might be. You know what I've just suddenly realized? It's gone completely out of my mind what the color of heather is. I think it's like a tannish brown. I'll have to look that one up. So it's just this boring landscape, going up one mountain, coming down, very little growth or vegetation at all. Morning passed, afternoon came, but in all the silent waste there was no sign of any dwelling. They were growing anxious, for they now saw that the house might be hidden almost anywhere between them and the mountains. They came on unexpected valleys, narrow with deep sides, that opened suddenly at their feet, and they looked down surprised to see trees below them and running water at the bottom. There were gullies that they could almost leap over, but very deep with waterfalls in them. There were dark ravines that one could neither jump nor climb into. There were bogs, some of them green, pleasant places to look at with flowers growing bright and tall, but a pony that walked there with a pack on its back would never have come out again. It was indeed a much wider land from the ford to the mountains than ever you would have guessed. Bilbo was astonished. The only path was marked with white stones, some of which were small, others were half covered with moss or heather. Altogether, it was a very slow business following the track, even guided by Gandalf, who seemed to know his way about pretty well. His head and beard wagged this way and that as he looked for stones, and they followed his head. But they seemed no nearer to the end of the search when the day began to fail. Tea time had long gone by, and it seemed supper time would soon do the same. There were moths fluttering about, and the light became very dim, for the moon had not risen. Bilbo's pony began to stumble over roots and stones. You know what that reminds me of? And you need to relate these things. I once did a trail run of a couple 5Ks set over a series of various hours, every 2.5 hours. And I tripped over everything. I think I still bear some scars on my hands, those patches, where I just kept hitting the ground and hitting the ground. And it kind of sounds like this landscape. It's just barren. There's a little root, a rock, and you're trying to find the best path through something while continuing to move forward. So, okay, side note over. So there are moths fluttering about, and the light became very dim, for the moon had not risen. Bilbo's pony began to stumble over roots and stones. They came to the edge of a steep fall in the ground so suddenly that Gandalf's horse nearly slipped down the slope. "Here it is at last," he called, and the others gathered round him and looked over the edge. They saw a valley far below. They could hear the voice of hurrying water and a rocky bed at the bottom. The scent of trees was in the air, and there was a light on the valley side across the water. Bilbo never forgot the way they slithered and slipped in the dusk down the steep zigzag path into the secret valley of Rivendell. The air grew warmer as they got lower, and the smell of the pine trees made him drowsy, so that every now and again he nodded and nearly fell off, or bumped his nose on the pony's neck. Their spirits rose as they went down and down. The trees changed to beech and oak, and there was a comfortable feeling in the twilight. The last green had almost faded out of the grass when they came at length to an open glade not far above the banks of the stream. It smells like elves, thought Bilbo, and he looked up at the stars. They were burning bright and blue. Just then came a burst of song like laughter in the trees. And it's italicized as a little song right here. Oh, what are you doing? And where are you going? Your ponies need shoeing. And it goes on. There's more. The river is flowing. Oh, tra-la-la-lee. Here down in the valley. Oh, what are you seeking? And what are you making? There is a reeking. The Bancocks are baking. Oh, trillalalali, the valley is jolly, ha-ha. Oh, where are you going, with beards all a-wagging? Not knowing, what brings Mr. Baggins and Balin and Dwalin down into the valley in June, ha-ha. Oh, will you be staying, or will you be flying? Your ponies are straying, the daylight is dying. To fly would be folly, to stay would be jolly, and listen and hark till the end of the dark to our tune, ha-ha. So they laughed and sang in the trees, and pretty fair nonsense, I dare say you think it. Not that they would care. They would only laugh all the more if you told them so. They were elves, of course. Soon Bilbo caught glimpses of them as the darkness deepened. He loved elves, though he seldom met them. But he was a little frightened of them, too. Dwarves don't get on well with them. Even decent enough dwarves, like Thorin and his friends, think them foolish, which is a very foolish thing to think, or get annoyed with them. For some elves tease them and laugh at them, and most of all at their beards. Well, well, said a voice. Just look, Bilbo the Hobbit on a pony, my dear. Isn't it delicious? Most astonishing, wonderful. Then off they went into another song as ridiculous as the one I have written down in full. At last, one, a tall young fellow, came out from the trees and bowed to Gandalf and to Thorin. Welcome to the valley, he said. Thank you, said Thorin a bit gruffly. But Gandalf was already off his horse and among the elves, talking merrily with them. You're a little out of your way, said the elf. That is, if you are making for the only path across the water and to the house beyond. We will set you right, but you had best get on foot until you are over the bridge. Are you going to stay a bit and sing with us, or will you go straight on? Supper is preparing over there, he said. I can smell the wood fires for the cooking. Tired as he was, Bilbo would have liked to stay a while. Elvish singing is not a thing to miss. In June, under the stars, not if you care for such things. Also, he would have liked to have a few private words with these people that seemed to know his name and all about him, although he had never seen them before. He thought their opinion of his adventure might be interesting. Elves know a lot and are wondrous folk for news, and know what is going on among the peoples of the land, as quick as water flows, or quicker. But the dwarves were all for supper as soon as possible just then, and would not stay. On they all went, leading their ponies, till they were brought to a good path, and so at last at the very brink of the river. It was flowing fast and noisily, as mountain streams do of a summer evening, when sun has been all day on the snow far up above. There was only a narrow bridge of stone without a parapet, as narrow as a pony could well walk on, and over that they had to go, slow and careful, one by one, each leading his pony by the bridle. The elves had brought bright lanterns to the shore, and they sang a merry song as the party went across. "Don't dip your beard in the foam, father," they cried to Thorin, who was bent almost on his hands and knees. "It's long enough without watering it." "Mind Bilbo doesn't eat all the cakes," they called. "He is too fat to get through keyholes yet." "Hush, hush, good people and good night," said Gandalf, who came last. "Valleys have ears, and some elves have over-merry tongues. Good night." And so at last they all came to the last homely house and found its doors flung wide. So we're going to stop there because I'm actually at 21 minutes. No really harrowing adventures. A couple of words that I need to look up. Heather and a parapet. I should know what a parapet is, but it's been such a long time since I've read that word. I can't quite picture it, except that I have a narrow bridge maybe, and I get the feeling that it's made out of stone. Oh, it does say that. There was only a narrow bridge of stone without a parapet. So I have to look up a parapet. And Bilbo is curious as to why the elves know so much about him when he hasn't seemed to talk to them at all, and about each of the dwarves as well.